Lin recognized the old man sitting 2 seats away. It was Mr. Zhang, his former neighbor. Lin had attended his funeral the previous winter. Then the light from the screen moved across the rows behind him. His grandmother was there. His grandfather sat beside her, both watching the film as if nothing were wrong. They had been buried 6 years earlier. No one looked at Lin. No one whispered or coughed. Even when he stood up and knocked over his stool, every face remained turned toward the screen. Lin ran. This happened in the late 1980s, in a small village where few families owned a television. Whenever a traveling projection team arrived, people carried stools from home and gathered around a white cloth tied between 2 trees. Lin rarely missed one. One cold autumn evening, he heard that a village several miles away was showing a romance film. He asked a few friends to go with him, but none wanted to make the trip. It was cold, late, and farther than they wanted to walk. Lin went alone. The dirt road crossed open fields. After only a couple of miles, he saw pale light flickering ahead. He could hear dialogue and music from a film. Beneath it was a low murmur that sounded like a crowd, though he could not make out a single voice. The village he was looking for should still have been much farther away. Between 2 large locust trees, a gray-white screen glowed above rows of people. Lin assumed the location had changed. He unfolded his wooden stool and sat near the back. Almost everyone around him was elderly. There were no children, no young couples, and none of the men who usually joked through outdoor movies. Lin saw only white hair and dark jackets facing forward. After he sat down, the murmur disappeared. The film continued, but everything around it was silent. No one spoke or shifted. There were no insects in the grass and no dogs barking in the distance. Only the movie could be heard. A man near Lin moved slightly, and the light caught his face. That was when Lin understood why so many people looked familiar. They were not strangers from another village. They were people whose funerals he remembered. Then the screen brightened, and he saw his grandparents behind him. Lin left his stool and ran across the fields without looking back. By the time he reached home, his clothes were damp with sweat despite the cold. By morning, he had a high fever. A local doctor gave him medicine, but it did little. When Lin finally told his parents where he had been, they went to an elder in the village. The elder brought another man to the house that evening. The visitor burned a small bundle of paper outside the gate, spoke quietly for several minutes, and told Lin not to return to those trees alone. Lin's fever began to fall the next day. Several days later, he went back with 3 friends. The 2 locust trees were easy to find, but there was no projector, no white cloth, and no open ground where a large audience could have been sitting. A wide spiderweb stretched between the trees. In the morning light, it looked pale enough to be mistaken for a screen from a distance. Several spiders moved across it. Below the web, the dirt was covered with footprints. Some circled the trees. Others stopped where Lin remembered placing his stool. His friends examined them carefully. Every footprint had the same worn pattern. They all came from Lin's shoes. Behind the trees, hidden by tall grass, was an old burial ground. Lin stood there for a while, looking from the graves to the web. After that night, he still watched movies whenever a projection team came to his village. But he never walked to another showing alone. What stayed with him was the sound of his stool hitting the ground as he stood up. It was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Not one person turned around. Subscribe to Mistcurrent stories for more strange mysteries, unexplained encounters, and dark legends.